Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Del Beccaro, and welcome to Politics in Perspective. This week, we have a special guest. We did a pre-recording with Michele Tafoya, four-time Emmy Award-winning sports broadcaster, reporter, and she's just fabulous. You're going to love that interview. In my opening statement, I want to go over the fallout from the recent election of last week, the 2025 election. Before I get to that, though, I want to thank Ex American News for carrying us, along with worldviewtube.com. We're on YouTube. We are on Rumble, AUN TV, and look for us to be picked up by someone else shortly as well. Of course, you can get all the shows at politicalvanguard.com. But for now, let's talk about election 2025 and I guess what some consider to be the fallout. So it wasn't as bad as the left-leaning media would have you believe, but it wasn't perfect for Republicans either. So let's think about this for a minute. You see my 4 bullet points there, and let's start with that was an election in 4 blue states, 4 traditionally blue states, not something recently turned blue. So if the Democrats hadn't won in all those states, it would have been quite the story. In fact, the steam would have gone out of their, or the wind would have gone out of their sails in a hurry, but they won. And it's, of course, they're turning it into, oh my God, it's all over for Trump and the Republicans, which of course is just as ridiculous as the Republicans saying that the Democrat Party is dead. The Democrat Party isn't dead, and this last election wasn't that bad. Always remember, the Democrats look at the popular vote when it comes to elections, and they saw that Trump didn't reach 50%, and they saw that Kamala Harris was only just over a point behind. From that perspective, they don't see it as much of a loss. A few thousand votes in the swing states, or a couple of them, and they thought they could have won. So there you have it. We had an election in 4 states. They won. They were worried about New Jersey to a significant degree. I don't know how the hell the polling went so bad there, but at the end of the day, it wasn't catastrophic for them. It does pose some issues for the Republicans. Now, the Democrats have a short-term gain here. They could have a long-term loss. And what I'm referring to is my second bullet point. June 30th on foxnews.com, I published an article about how Mondami, Bass, and Brandon Johnson from Chicago, Bass, of course, from LA, could well define the Democrats next year. Next year is the midterms. And oh, by the way, right, the party in the White House tends to have trouble in the very next election. That also was an aspect of what happened this past week. But those 3 mayors literally govern 1 in every 25 Americans. If you take their surrounding areas, it grows much larger than that. It's, LA County is bigger than 42 states. New York is everywhere in the sense of it's such a big media center, you can't avoid it. So what does that mean? Well, these 3 incompetent governors who continue to be way out there politically, these are not average Democrats. These are the far left Democrats. Keep in mind, you had Bass was part of a group involved in bombing. You have Mondami, who's a Marxist, and Johnson, who's just horrible. They're all going to define the Democrats in the year to come, especially Mondami, because he's so incompetent. I mean, folks, let's think about Mondami. He's never had a job in his life. The New York job, New York City, is the second most sophisticated bureaucracy probably in the world. And who's never run a board meeting, now has to be the manager of this endless bureaucracy. he's going to look like a fool doing that. Not to mention his true radicalism is coming out. As the morning after the election, he goes on ABC's Good Morning America and says he wants a $9 billion tax increase. $9 billion? Kathy Hochul can't go for that. She could lose governor if she did that. So they're going to have a lot of problems in New York City, and that is likely going to define the Democrats. For the Republicans, though, there are some warning signs. One of which is that economics and the economy stupid still matters. The Republicans took their sweet time passing that tax bill. Could have been, if you look at the complexity of the bill, it wasn't. What they couldn't do was get their act together because they have to convince. That's what the Republican Party does. It doesn't fall in line like the Democrats. So instead of passing it in February, they passed it in July. Why does that matter? Because the Republican economic plans will take months and months to produce economic fruits for most of the country. That isn't trickle down. It's the reality that the economy is shifting from an economy based on government hiring to an economy based on the private sector investing and producing jobs. That takes a long time. It takes 6 to 9 months. Well, that's in December and into next year. If they had been efficient, the economy would have been better. The economy must be better if they're going to do better next year. The last thing I wanted to talk about is that Republicans cannot count on their voters coming out as if Trump's on the ballot, because they don't. There's no proof that they will come out in the same way for other Republicans as they will for Trump. And that's a problem, of course, because the midterms, Trump won't be on the ballot. So there's something really important about this, which is that in midterm elections, the party in the White House tends not to put an agenda for the next 2 years. Often, all they do is just sit on their laurels or say we still have things to do. So the opposing party talks about all the things that are going wrong and often talks about what they would do if they got into power after all. That's exactly how Newt Gingrich got into power during the Clinton administration. The Republicans must come up with not only good economic results for next year if they want voters to come out for them, but they must be bold, they must have an agenda, and they must have economic results. So that's my opening statement. Next up, our special interview with Michele Tafoya, and I'll be back with the political roundup after that. Thanks so much for tuning in. Welcome back, everyone, to Politics in Perspective. Our difference maker this week, I'm excited to have Michele Tafoya on. You probably have known her over the years in her many roles, but she's a 4-time Emmy Award winner. She was on the NFL sidelines. She's covered the Olympics, knows so much about the media. And so I'm excited to have her on because the media, of course, plays such a big role in American culture. So Michele, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm great.
All right, good. So we only have a half an hour because I'm sure I could talk to you all day. But I want to get to some questions that my listeners have and my friends have who care so much about the NFL. So if you don't mind, since you know more about the NFL than we do, if you could just give us a sense. But actually, before that, you're a 4-time Emmy Award winner. You were a staple for that industry.
How did you transition away or why?
Well, why is the bigger question. I tried to leave a few years earlier than I did, but the good folks at NBC wanted me to stay for one more Super Bowl, wanted me to cover another Olympic Games, and so I did. Really, I've just had this pull in my gut to try to be part of the national conversation. I love this country so much. I was raised to love this country by my Hispanic father and my Irish mom, and who grew up very poor and lived the American dream. And I have too. I grew up middle class, and I have my siblings and I have managed to live what I call the American dream. It doesn't mean we're super wealthy. It just means that we have been able to pursue our happiness and find our place in the world. Do things that I don't think I could do anywhere else. So I see this country sort of folding in on itself, and it's making me angry, frustrated, sad, a little scared, and I just felt I had to be part of the solution rather than just sitting back. Now, you cannot do that when you're on the number one show on television, which was Sunday Night Football, and prior to that, Monday Night Football. So, I knew that. That's what I signed up for. I agreed to those conditions that I would not, go super public with a lot of my beliefs, and then I just couldn't do it anymore. I needed to speak out more, and that's why I left.
Okay. So let's start though, because your podcast relates to the intersection of American culture, politics, and a lot of things. And a question a lot of people have is about the NFL is this whole issue of the halftime show. Now, I look back at all the halftime shows in history, and they started out with marching bands.
Up
Uh,
with people.
yeah, in '76, they celebrated the country.
Mhm.
They had the Rolling Stones, they had Bruce
I was at the
Springsteen.
Rolling Stones one. Yep, I covered that game.
Uh, so, why is it so different? I mean, I am so old. This is how old I am. I bet on Joe Namath in 1969. I was 70 years old. I bet 50 cents, took them straight up, and they won. It's the last jet bet I won. I'm from Long Island. But I'm also so old that I didn't even know who Bad Bunny was.
Yeah.
So why Bad Bunny? Is football about bunnies? I mean, what's going on?
Okay, well, so, after the George Floyd, incident and the riots and Black Lives Matter, the NFL really embraced, BLM. They embraced Colin Kaepernick. They embraced, allowing players to kneel for the anthem, which, by the way, if they wanna do that, that's their prerogative. We have a free country. Um, in doing so, they hired Rock Nation, Jay-Z's firm, to start selecting the halftime shows. And I think it was a very specific move relative to that time in our country. And they've continued to work with Rock Nation and Jay-Z and that operation to select their halftime shows. So Bad Bunny is kind of a global phenomenon. Listen, I ride a Peloton bike, so I hear him now and then, and I'm not a big fan, but he is a global performer, and I think the NFL also has an eye on being a very global sport. Clearly, they're playing more and more games overseas, around the world, and that's what the NFL wants to become, global. So I think there are two things at work here. It's a Rock Nation selection, so you're not going to get U2 anytime again soon, or Foo Fighters or anything like that, I would guess. Um, again, I would say it's that global thing. Now, there were a lot of protests, and there will be a counter halftime show. There usually is a Puppy Bowl or something like that. But the NFL is going to live with this decision. And the problem I think that people have with Bad Bunny is not that he sings in Spanish; it's that he's been kind of anti-American. And this is I think where people have the biggest problem with him as a halftime performer in America's game.
So it is a bottom line thing. We think of Dylan Mulvaney and Bud Light. Is that just a small sector now who watches the game versus what otherwise is going on? I mean, is it so global, and he is so global that they can turn away the Bud
Mm.
Light drinker?
You mean kind of turn their backs on average Americans for this?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think that the NFL probably likes the conversation about it, likes a bit of controversy. You know what they'll do? Likely, I don't know if it's been announced yet or not because I haven't been paying super close attention. But generally, what they'll do is they'll have the national anthem sung by a country singer to appease all the country fans. This is how it works. And, the NFL is still singing Lift Every Voice and Sing, which is also known as the Black National Anthem. That began around the same time as the George Floyd BLM movement really peaked, and they haven't changed that. They've distanced it more from the actual game. They don't play it back to back with the national anthem, but they continue to integrate it. And I I love the song. It's a beautiful song, but to suggest that there are national anthems based on race is really
The
I'm not a
opposite of
fan.
America.
I'm not a fan.
That's the opposite of America.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in this same vein, I see they still have the end zone sayings here and there.
Here and there, yeah.
My daughter's school back in the day um, didn't have all these political signs, but now I drive by it and it has a sign says no hate.
Yeah.
Now I'm so old, I remembered when we were positive, love one another or care for a friend or hug whatever it is. It seems profoundly negative, and you can take this anywhere you want, for the NFL to say at the end negative things as opposed to like the school does or as the school does, no hate.
Mhm.
Why can't we say positive things either in football or our culture in general?
I think it's a great question, and it's like driving by someone's house in your neighborhood and they have one of those signs in the yard, all are welcome here, love is for everyone, yada yada. And then those same people in that house where it's quiet and private tweet out that they hate Charlie Kirk and he deserved to die. So, it's there's a lot of hypocrisy. And I think the virtue signaling allows them to say makes them feel okay about saying some of the other hateful things. I don't know. I mean, look, I've seen schools take their American flags out of their auditoriums. It crushes me. It breaks my heart. It's like, why are we doing this? Why are we diminishing our country in our children's eyes? I see classrooms teaching anti-American concepts and theories, and it's all so disturbing to me because what we're doing is we're just pitting a bunch of people against a bunch of other people and generalizing and stereotyping, and it's just so counterproductive. And I fear the direction that we're going. I want the message to kids to be, you're powerful, you're good, you're kind. People are generally good. There is evil in the world. Yes, there is. And we need to be ready for it and prepared for it and respond to it accordingly. But guess what? The color of your skin, your gender, that's not what determines where you're going in this country. And we've got proof of that all over the place. But instead of applauding that progress that we've made in this country, people just keep going backward and saying, but remember slavery, but remember slavery. You're really not that free. Remember slavery, remember Jim Crow. It's still here. Here's where it is. Here's where it's lurking. You are oppressed and there is an oppressor. And those are the only two classes of people. And it's just not true. But it's almost like this brainwashing going on with our youth, and it's devastating. And I don't I think that you just need a critical mass of good people to stand up and say, no, that's not true. And I'm not teaching my kids that crap.
Okay, before we leave sports, let's stick with what you were just saying. The corporate America went through a period where it bended a knee to this
Mhm.
and put in these programs, and they have stepped away from that. I don't think ESPN and the sports have stepped away yet. They still seem mired in this. Now, I watch football. I mean, I'm in politics all the time almost. I have a law practice too. and I get the tumble there. I watch movies or I watch sports to get away, right?
Hmm.
And just have my mind, well, usually I want to do it to be happy, but I told you I was a Jet fan. So what will sports emerge from this? Are they going to trail corporate America? Where do you see it going?
Sports, I think, likes to knows it appeals. Here's the thing: I think they like to think they appeal to a younger, cooler group of people. But the fact is, as Michael Jordan famously said, Republicans buy sneakers too. And everyone loves sports. And when you turn sports into this ground for lecturing your viewers, for telling your viewers that they need to be more this or more that. I mean, I think one of the last bastions in sports right now to get corrected, if you will, is trans athletes in sports. We're still seeing it. It's not over. It's still there. And we've just had this incident recently in Los Angeles where a Black lesbian woman was in her locker room and turned around and saw a fully intact man staring back at her. She complained. It was a Gold's Gym. She complained, and she's the one that got her membership terminated, not the man. So this is still really a problem. And the trans activists say, hey, we're here to stay. That's fine, but get out of our spaces. You can live your life however you want, but that doesn't mean men should be in women's sports, and it doesn't mean men should be in women's spaces. And it's just amazing to me that women, so many women are tolerating this, are saying, "Oh, we've got to be respectful and inclusive of these people." You can be inclusive without putting them in unfair advantage positions of unfair advantage in sport, or without welcoming them into your daughter's locker room, for God's sakes. It's really crazy. I don't think it's an 80-20 issue. I think it's a 90-10 or 95-5 issue. People are afraid to speak up. And like I said, that's when things go wrong, when people stand by and do nothing.
Yeah, so my daughter is 32, so this whole and she played sports, so I miss this fortunately. Um, I can't imagine what a mother of a teenage daughter goes through at this point. And there's Riley Gaines out there and this movement, but there's still this resistance,
Yeah,
and and to me, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot at the college level. So,
oh,
what
for
thoughts do
sure.
you have for parents? I mean, how do they prepare their child to their daughter to go into women's sports, but then have this in the back of their mind? Is there a path out of this controversy?
I think that where we've seen the most courage and bravery about this is like people like Riley Gaines, and she has sparked a movement. And there's a company called XXXY Athletics that I am associated with, that Jennifer Say, who's a former gymnast, started in Colorado. And we say just that: there's XX and there's XY. It's a chromosomal difference between men and women that separate us, that make us uniquely different. And so what you've seen since Riley and Jen and a lot of us have spoken up is young women at the high school level saying, I'm not competing against a biological male. Now, here in Minnesota, we had a girls' high school softball championship with a male pitcher. And I don't care that they identify as a female, it was a male. And they simply dominated and won state. And we're okay with that? That's not fair. And I think that we're going to go one direction or the other. We're going to have a lot of people say, forget it. I'm not competing against a male. I'm not going to do it. We've seen that in fencing. We've seen it in swimming. We've seen it in a number of arenas. Or you've got to have, maybe it swings the other way. And all of a sudden you see an entire college or high school basketball team populated by trans women, meaning all biological men who now just identify as women. And everyone is going to go, okay, wait a minute. Now this is starting to now this isn't just one person here and there. So I don't know which direction's going to happen first. But I would say to parents, embolden, empower your girls to say, no, I will not race against a biological male. I will not swim against a male. I will not participate in volleyball where there's a male on the other side of the net. I won't do it. And it's unfortunate because these girls may lose opportunities, but they have to think of it this way. You are laying the table. You are setting the table. You are laying the groundwork and the foundation for the future of women's sports, which I thought we did when Title IX passed, but I guess
Right? Yeah, I mean, wasn't this fight about giving them this opportunity, which they seem to be taking away? Okay, so you've mentioned Charlie Kirk, who was in his late 20s. Um, and now we have Mondami, who is in his 30s. So we got to wonder where the culture is going. I have a sense that there is, remember with Nixon, there was the silent majority. His belief that there was still a majority of Americans who were more traditional and would come to his rescue versus the 60s protests and all of that. With Kirk, I think there's a silent morality out there. There's a huge percentage of Americans who want the normal life that I think you do for Americans and for, especially for American children. I've
yeah,
always said that people in Oklahoma are like, fine, let San Francisco be San Francisco, but just don't impose it on me
right.
in Oklahoma. But now we see Mondami, and you see these numbers come back, 80+% of younger women
Mhm.
vote for this guy. I saw some crazy thing where a woman said, well, that's because he wants to take care of us. Where does this cultural clash go in your mind?
I don't know. It has yet to play out. I ask myself this every single day. He wants to take care of you, and yet he doesn't really believe in law enforcement or policing that has been successful. How is that taking care of you? And why is it that so many of these voters don't think they can take care of themselves and that they think that a free bus is going to solve their issues? A free bus means you're going to have all kinds of people on that bus that you don't want to be on the bus with. And they're going to sit there all day long and maybe they're going to do drugs or who God knows what they're going to do. Um it seems like yeah, I can only think that this has festered its way through academia. Because this is where so many people get their ideology is from, being in school and being told that the government is there to take care of them. The bigger the government, the smaller the individual. So if you don't want to be independent
We
and,
gotta write that one down. That the
you know,
bigger the government,
the
the
smaller
smaller.
the individual.
I love it.
It's very simple. You start to lose your control, and I don't want this country to go into the depths of socialism in order to find out how awful it is. So we don't teach kids civics. We don't teach them the history of Mao, of Stalin, of the Bolsheviks, of how many people have died under
Even
socialism and communism.
Venezuela.
Even, I mean, it's right there. It's right there. I don't know how we ignore that. Cuba, North Korea. I mean, I don't know how we ignore these things. But I think if you teach enough people that your country is worse than North Korea or Venezuela because there
Yes.
was slavery once, and there's the patriarchy, which that's another topic altogether. I, I don't know where we go, but good people have to stand up and get into positions where they teach, where they at least counter what's going on at their kids' schools. That's what my husband and I have been doing for the last 18 years. And, just trying to bring sense to people, common sense.
Yeah, so I wrote a book, The Divided Era, which explains, in for me, in significant part, the more government decides, the more it divides. We have these competing philosophies, which worked out when government didn't make the final decision and force us into these camps, right?
Right.
It'd be like if two people were married and they have disagreements, they agree to disagree on some things. But imagine if you had someone living in the house said, "Okay, no, you win constantly," right? You wouldn't stay married for very long. A big part of our divided era is our divided media. And so I want to transition into that because that was your world. You had to, I suppose, purse your lips many times when you really wanted to say how you felt. Is the characterization that they live in this small world and they only talk to each other? Is that really what's going on, or is it a bigger issue?
I think it's bigger than that because now, and really, you got to go to people like Rush Limbaugh and Fox News were the first sort of really high profile conservative platforms, right? And because Rush was such a contrast to everything else out there, people like were in shock. What what is he saying? And then a lot of people gravitated toward his pull of, here's what America's really all about. And I had the good fortune of meeting Rush a number of times. He's a massive Steelers fan. So he came out to a couple of Steelers games and he and Al Michaels were good friends and we'd have dinner together. And he is a wonderful guy. And yeah, he said some things on the air that really made people listen. I think that was his gift. Even if it made people angry. But I think he had more fans than he had hate. Who knows? It might have been 50-50. Then you have Fox News come into the fray, right? And this was like, whoa, such a contrast to the messaging that was pervasive on every other channel in media. And so now you see the success of that. You see the success of a Greg Gutfeld over a Stephen Colbert. And you have to ask yourself, why aren't more why aren't more of the networks doing this? Well, now you've got CBS hiring Barry Weiss, a very even-handed journalist, to sort of revamp CBS News. That's a massive development. So it's going to be really interesting to see how CBS evolves, if they do evolve. And the other thing that you've got now is you've got every single like this podcast and my podcast and just TikTok and Instagram. People can be citizen journalists. They can let their opinions be out there. So whenever anyone says, "Oh, free speech is being infringed," Jimmy Kimmel got suspended. That has nothing to do with free speech. Jimmy can go on TikTok. He can go to all of his followers and say whatever the hell he wants, and he will not get thrown in jail or arrested, unlike other places in the world. But if his company that pays him says, whoa, 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 Jimmy, this is going to hurt our bottom line, and we've got to rein you in, that's entirely their prerogative. If a teacher teaching fourth graders goes on an online rant saying that Charlie Kirk deserved to die, and the school employing that teacher says, whoa, 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 you're out of line. This is not how we want our school represented. They have the right to fire that teacher. The teacher's not thrown in jail. The teacher can go back online and say whatever the hell he or she wants. So, when people start to say free speech shouldn't impact any part of your existence, employers have the right to say, this does not comport with our values. You do not represent us, and you got to go.
All right, but we only have not. I told you this would go by too fast for me and for us, but I got to ask you about go back to sports, money in sports, gambling. We're shocked to find out that there was gambling. When I'm not a gambler, I don't. When I go to Vegas, I go to a store and a show. I don't go sit at some tables. We have 20-something-year-old kids playing these games,
Yeah.
and there's sponsored by.
Yes.
So how do these sports industries, how bad off is it? And is there going to be more indicted? You can say anything you want here, but it seems to me culturally, putting a 24-year-old with all this money next to a gambling operation is a shipwreck waiting to happen.
Yeah, we shouldn't really be too surprised by these developments. Look, I think we separated pro sports and gambling for a long time. Just ask Pete Rose and anybody else. We kept them separate. We said that sports, whether it was amateur or pro, was sort of this sacred thing that we were not going to involve. We wouldn't, no teams in Las Vegas. Hell no. No teams in Las Vegas, no games in Las Vegas. We're going to keep it as separate as we possibly can. But follow the money. Fantasy football really started to show how much kids wanted to sort of place these wagers on these outcomes of these athletes. Wow. And fantasy football became huge, particularly with young people. And you know what that translated to? Eyeballs on the TVs or the streaming. Oh my gosh, I've got a guy on the Packers. I need the Packers to do this. I need their defense to do that. I've got a guy on the Giants. I need that tight end to score. Now they're watching, because it matters to them more than just if their team, it's not just about the team, your Jets, it's not about that anymore. It's about every individual, and they're watching all of these, and it's made the league so much more popular. So now, maybe it's not so bad if we invite gambling in. There's a lot of money to be made here. Tons. The night before Chauncey Billups was arrested, he was coaching the Portland Trailblazers against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I had the game on in our living room. And the sideline reporter came on, and her microphone flag was FanDuel Sports. That's a gambling platform. So now all these gambling platforms own these smaller networks that broadcast the local games, and you can't get away from it. And you got a phone, and you can be sitting in an NBA arena or a Major League Baseball park, and you can set bets from your phone. You can be at a college game and set prop bets on, this wide receiver, this running back, and this quarterback. And you can do all of that from your phone while you're sitting there watching a game. That makes a ton of money. So follow the money. Now, is the toothpaste out of the tube and we can't put it back in? There's going to have to be some real soul searching by all of these leagues if they want to, because the bottom line for viewers and the fans is they want the games to be clean. They don't want gambling. They like to gamble on the outcomes, but they don't want the players fixing these things like this.
Yeah, I just don't. I mean, these athletes.
Yeah,
they're very young human beings, and people ask me, "Well, he's got a $24 million contract. Why would he do that?"
It's not for the athlete. It's not necessarily about the money. It's about
living on the edge.
Either that, or how about this? You've got an athlete who comes from the inner city, who's got a ton of guys, his friends, his buddies, his entourage, and he's able to call them and go, "Hey, take the under, because I don't know, I might just pull myself in the second quarter." Now he's helping out his friends, and there's a lot of I'm sure joy that comes with that, to be able to help their friends. That's one part of it. It's really, really interesting. It'd be interesting to know what all the dynamics are, but I'll tell you, sometimes where there's a lot of money, there's just not enough money. Like, these athletes are making a ton of money, and
okay, so let me stop you right there.
Yeah,
college sports and NIL. I mean, again, I have a neighbor whose son plays major college football, barely plays, but he's got a huge NIL contract. And since you care about, the moral fiber of the country, how the richer the country, I write history books. As wealth goes up, morality tends to dip. I mean, I didn't even think about the entree of fantasy football into betting in the manner you described it. So, I mean, all of this money to all of these young people.
I've got two nieces who are Division I athletes, and they're getting their NIL, and I don't like this. I understand there was this balancing act between, well, if a coach is getting paid $10 million a year and the players are getting nothing, that was hitting people wrong. And I get that. And, some of these players are making their colleges wealthy by playing great football or basketball. And, and they're going, well, what do I get out of this? Now, it used to be that you were happy getting an education and room and board. It's not enough anymore. But this complete opposite. Like you had two ends of a spectrum here. They're getting nothing, and now they're getting millions. There was the fact that everyone sat in a room, that the leadership of the NCAA of whatever, they all sat in a room and said, "Oh, this is a good idea." It suggests to me they didn't do much second level thinking of where this would go next, and that's on them. And I don't know how they clean up this mess without having to do something really sort of retractive that will make athletes angry. But yeah, you don't really have purity anywhere. That's why I'm now a huge Division III sports fan, because that's where it's still pure.
Interesting. All right.
And my son plays Division III baseball, so
There you go.
that is a joy, because you go there. Like, think about the last quick thing, that Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, who was cheating. That's insider trading. Imagine 99% of the guys, I would think, or at least 95% of the guys playing athletics pro, they're working their tails off to win games, to be good, to make the all-star team, to go to the playoffs. And one of their teammates cheats? Imagine how the rest of the locker room feels about that.
I would be so incensed if that
Yeah.
cost us the game.
Yeah.
I used to play pretty competitive softball. You know, I'm an attorney. For years. I have a career where but if I lost a softball game, I was unhappy. If I found out whatever. All right. So the whole world has listened to how articulate you have been through your whole career. Earlier, you said about getting involved. Do you have a candidacy in your future?
Oh, I get asked this so often, and all I can say is I have nothing to announce at this time, sir. Nothing to announce.
I ran against Kamala Harris in 2015 for U.S. Senate. Obviously, I lost. So at the time, I said, yeah, you can blame me. But now I say I tried to warn you all.
Well, and you know what? And they turn around and they try to say, we warned you all about Donald Trump. I mean, it's amazing how it, the politics that I grew up around and watched my parents involved in was nothing like it is now. And I just pray to God there is some sort of, like I said, some group of people, some coalition that comes together and gets back in office on sanity and common sense.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Michele, I knew this would go quickly. I've been passing around your podcast as much as I can. Thanks so much for joining us today, and hopefully you'll come back in a couple of months or so, and once Mondami takes effect, and give us your thoughts on that.
We'll have to see, but thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we'll be back with Politics in Perspective in just a moment. Welcome back to Politics in Perspective. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Michele Tafoya. I can certainly see a Senator Tafoya in the years to come. We'll have to watch her and see how that develops. Even though I only want you to watch my podcast and no other podcast on earth, you should certainly sign up for her podcast and keep track. I think she is a great intellect for common sense out there, and I think she could appeal to a lot of people. So for the political roundup today, we cover the sort of the week, but we did that with the election. So I want to go to a particular issue, and that is the filibuster. Of course, if you look at President Trump, he has suggested that the Republicans get rid of the filibuster because he says the Democrats are going to do that. And he thinks that if they get rid of the filibuster, that the Republicans can pass an aggressive agenda, the economy would be doing really well, and they could keep the Democrats at bay. Now, of course, the filibuster only applies to the Senate. Interesting thing about the Senate is, of course, the Senate is 2 seats from every state. There are 50 states. Of those 50 states, there's about 19 reliable red states. I'm not very good at math, but 19 times 2 is 38. Of the Republicans, there are somewhere around 25 to 26 reliable red states. That's about 50 senators. The truth is, the Republicans, if they put up good candidates, we can define good candidates, but the reality is if they put up candidates who can win, and that doesn't mean candidates that the establishment likes. It means candidates capable of raising money, candidates that are articulate, candidates that have an agenda, candidates that understand limited government and will work to do that, on and on and on, right? They should control the Senate for as far as the eye can see. The Senate's really important because that's where, if the filibuster is removed, that they would exercise a lot of control. Now, but let's go back to the filibuster because it's not in the Constitution, right? It is a creature of the Senate. But in order to discuss the filibuster, we should consider why our founders came up with 3 branches. Of course, it wasn't their initial idea. Montesquieu out of France, he had an idea of these 3 entirely separate branches of government who had no control over each other. So that one acted completely autonomous of the others. Our founders, though, had these 3, right? The judiciary, the executive, and the legislative branches, and they are interconnected. And what they had hoped for was that they wanted government to move slowly. And so the only time government in our history moves quickly is when all 3 are in the same hands. Think of FDR and all this legislation he pushed through so very quickly. But when there is divided government, things move more slowly and there often is compromise. But now we're in the divided era, and the Democrats won't vote for anything Republican. And this isn't just about Trump. The next person that comes along, DeSantis, Vance, Rubio, they will demonize them because socialism has infected their party, and they will find ways to turn Rubio, a very nice man, into a demon. So the Democrats aren't going to play ball. In some senses, that's okay if you want government to move slowly. But if you want government to divest itself of a lot of power, they also have been blocking that. So what about the filibuster? Should the Republicans, because Trump says the Democrats are going to get rid of it the next time they have the Senate and a Democrat president, which, by the way, is possible because the Republicans don't put the best candidates forward when it comes to Senate sometimes, and there could be situations where that occurs. So is that a good idea? Well, I've thought long and hard about this. The reality is it could well be that the Democrats on day one will get rid of the filibuster. They've talked about that for a long time. It is the demand of the Democrat socialists that goes away. The Democrats, Chuck Schumer talked about doing it until they lost the Senate, and then they somehow, found the filibuster to once again be the most important thing on the globe. But we can be pretty sure with the way the Democrats are playing, including the shutdown, yeah, they probably will do that. So the question is whether Republicans will do that. And many think they won't. And then Trump may well be proven right that they get in power, take it away, and then there you go. So the question becomes, what should be done now? And quite honestly, it would be a sad day if that in fact occurred, because it would speed up government. And speeding up government is not what the goal of the founders were. The filibuster worked well for us because it helped as a country, because it helped slow the pace of government. And getting rid of the filibuster will vastly accelerate this possibility, because even when all three were in the same hands, if there wasn't 60 from the same party, you didn't get major legislation. The biggest legislation in history came when with bigger margins. The 60% or 60 senators is that big margin. If that is removed, God knows what the Democrats are going to do. I think they really will make Puerto Rico a state. They'll make DC a state. Why? Because they get 2 seats out of 2 more Senate seats, and that's how they take over the Senate. And that's going to be unbelievable. If they do that, that lead, and this is the reason why I talked earlier on, the reason why they want to do this is because they want to take over the Senate. They know they're behind in red and blue states. And so they want to make sure that when they're in power, they can now make up for that deficit and potentially rule that for years to come. There's so much uncertainty ahead. Now, if the Supreme Court does redistricting in the sense that they say it's illegal to use race, it could be that the Republicans pick up as many as 19 seats in the House and they could hold on to that. But that still wouldn't be a check on the Democrats if they took the Senate completely. The Senate's important, of course, because nominees are reviewed there, and they also approve cabinet positions and the like. And you can be sure if the Democrats had a full control of the Senate, they're not going to approve. They wouldn't have approved. They wouldn't approve Trump's cabinet nominees and others as it was. The Republicans had to use special circumstances to get that done. So even if the Republicans won the House, that still doesn't clear up everything as it relates to the US Senate. Now, I get why Trump has this position. I understand why the Republicans are reluctant to use it. It is very tempting. It may be that Trump's 100% right, that the Democrats are going to get rid of it on day one. He's sort of given him permission to do that, by the way, by bringing it up. But then the question becomes, what should we do right now? And it's kind of a Faustian bargain. It could change everything, and it probably will, and things will race forward when it comes to legislation, and the United States will whipsaw back and forth even more than it is today in policy, much like in England between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party from the last century across the pond. It's a dangerous development, and it's very counter to what our founders wanted. They wanted government to go slow. They did not want it to accelerate and flip back and forth with the pendulum. And that's the problem with big government. The bigger it gets, the worse off for economic policy and policy in general, and of course, freedom. I loved Michele Tafoya's line, the bigger the government, the smaller the individual. Well, that's the show for this week. Thanks for joining us on Politics and Perspective, and we'll see you next time.